Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along on this Monday evening that's a bit wet and dreich where I am. Absolutely delighted to welcome you along to this West Partnership session. Thank you to Fiona Hewitt, who's the chair of the West Partnership PSE network and who arranges all of these wonderful training opportunities. There are more, and I will send out in the link with any notes what's coming up for the rest of the session. And a huge welcome to Brian Costello from Headstrong, who's going to take you through his resource. I'm going to mute and hand over to you, Brian.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Katrina, can I ask, I was going to turn on the live captions, or are you happy? Will they come on YouTube, or do you want them on here?
Well, you can turn them on here. That would be great. Yep. And I realise I didn't introduce myself to anybody. I'm Kat Calvert, and I'm the workstream lead for Wellbeing for Learning across the West Partnership.
Fab. Right, let's get started. Let me do this, and for the purposes of Kat's video as well, I'm going to do that, which means that I should be the main person on your screen, because that's what we're looking for. Obviously, no, I'm all joking. Anyway, lovely to see you all. And I have to say, because I was looking at the chat there, hello, obviously, to Marianne from Fir Park. I mean, that's lovely. But then we've got somebody on from one of my old schools. We've got Colette from Turnbull. Hello, I'm an ex-Turnbull pupil myself, albeit only for first year. That's all I made in Bishop Briggs was 1 year before I moved to sunny Paisley away over here. Anyway, I am going to introduce myself in a little bit, but what I want to do first of all is I want to start off with a little bit of a story. And a story that we're going to come back to a little bit later on. Today's session, in terms of me talking, I'll talk up until about just before 5. I think it's about an hour and a half we've got in terms of timings. And then if you've got any questions following that, I'm more than happy to answer them, whether it's stuff that's in the presentation or if it's just other things about mental health. So we'll kind of be a game of two halves as well in my first 45 minutes, 50 minutes of talking. I'm going to chat to you a little bit about the model that we use for mental health. I hope that as experienced educators, experienced teachers, please feel free to take it. So what I mean by that is anything that I say, any of the examples that I use over the next little while are not exclusive Headstrong Brian examples. And therefore, if there's anything that's useful, especially when you're teaching mental health, well-being, anything like that, then please feel free to lift it, use it, do whatever you want with it. I'm not going to be butthurt if I hear that you're out there, using one of my stories. And then in the second half of today, I'm going to introduce you to some resources that are out there for free that we've designed for e-Sgoil, and they're out there easily used and easily pick-upable, which is a new phrase. Just to say, again, I'm just going to back up what Kat's just put in the chat there. I'm afraid I don't know your non-teacher name because you're on with your teacher name, but Mrs. Smith, your camera is on. We are recording the session. You can keep it on if you want, but you will end up on YouTube later once Kat uploads it. So if you want to switch it off, then that is absolutely okay. And hello as well to Vivian now as well, who has just said from Inverclyde. Hello to you as well. But let's start off by talking a little bit about and telling you a little bit about this story. This is a phone call that I got about, it was pre-COVID. So I don't know exactly. It was supposed to be there for about 3.5, 4 years ago. And we work a lot with young people, obviously, hence the reason for us being here. But we also have a private therapy practice away from the work that we do with schools, where we work one-on-one with a whole range of different people and individuals, from adults all the way through, although we specialise in working with teenagers. So I got a phone call from my mum. And mum comes on the phone and she tells me about her 14-year-old daughter. Now, her 14-year-old daughter she's phoning a mental health service. So you can already imagine that things maybe aren't going brilliantly for her 14-year-old daughter. She is partaking in activities that you wouldn't want your 14-year-old daughter to take part in. So she's drinking a lot. She's hanging around with what mum calls the wrong crowd. And that's then bringing her into contact with boys, and stuff's happening and things, and this young lady's self-esteem and confidence are basically through the floor. Mum tells me about how she is anxious and how this young lady has had so much anxiety that she's now occasionally school refusing. It's not a consistent school refusal, but it's getting there, and it is definitely starting to affect her education. She's in third year, in late third year, and therefore that is an issue for her as well. When I find out a little bit more about the story, she tells me about how her and her husband had split up and how her and her husband had recently separated. And that this has seemed to have an impact, especially because, as far as mum can see it, the main issue here and the main thing that's confusing this young lady is not only the fact that mum and dad have split up, but is the fact that mum and dad, now they have split up, are parenting in two very, very different ways. So what's happening is that mum is going down the hard line, like, this is how we're going to do it, and you're not going out, and you're grounded, and all of these types of things. Type approach, whereas dad's doing a dad thing, which is, oh yeah, you do whatever you want, babe, you know, you're only 14, you only live once, why don't you go out and live your life and be happy? And when I was asking her about how her daughter was feeling and what her daughter was saying, one of the things she said to me was she said that she keeps on telling me stupid things and saying silly things. And I said, like what? She said, well, she told me the other day that nobody likes her and that she's not as good as anybody else. And so what mum did was that mum did what mum did. I told her that that was ridiculous. I told her that that wasn't the case at all, and I told her that obviously she was liked, and obviously, you know, people loved her, and that me and her dad loved her, and that the separation was nothing to do with her, and and it went on. Now, this is a story and a type of story that you more than likely hear relatively often. Maybe not from mum, maybe sometimes from mum, but definitely from the pupils that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, I know that you've got a range of skills that are on here. Many of you will be involved in some sort of support, well-being, pastoral guidance, something like that. That's some type of role as that. So these are the stories you hear from your kids all the time. In fact, you may even hear the things like, I'm not good enough and nobody likes me, or something like that that gets said all the time. And the interesting thing is that we're hearing these things all the time. So we have a bit of a pattern going on. We have something happening where this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And I don't need to tell you guys that either, because you're feeling that in your schools. One of the biggest impacts that's happened post-COVID has been around mental health. It's interesting for me sitting out here as an organisation that we have never been busier. We are busier than we have been in a long, long time. And it's amazing. We've been on an amazing upward spiral. Do you have an upward spiral? We'll have an upward spiral. And an upward something or other as we get busier and busier, as more and more schools, because we were always busy, but now the difference is that there's budget. Now, there's not budget for everybody, but there's little bits of it floating about and little bits of it happening, and people are now more willing to spend it on well-being than previously when it was always attainment. I know that attainment's still a thing, and many of you, especially if you are support, guidance, pastoral well-being, something like that, will be tearing your hair out sometimes about attainment when you're like, but the kids are falling apart. How can we possibly attain if what's happening is the kids' mental health is all over the place? But it is changing, and from the outside, I would say that now we are having significantly more success with getting people to find the budget to do what we do best. But let me tell you a little bit about what we do. And to do that, what I'm going to do, in fact, didn't introduce myself. Sorry, let me introduce myself just before I come on to the next thing. So my name is Brian Costello. I'm from a company called Headstrong. As I've already explained to you, we do lots of things mental health. Our little catchphrase is that we want to inspire mental wealth. What we want is that people to feel mentally wealthy, to feel as if they've got so many abundant resources that actually that when bad things happen, I can accept that bad things happen and I know how to deal with them because I have a range of strategies and ways of dealing with them. I understand my mind. But the way that I like to explain more about what we do is that we have positive conversations with people about mental health. And what I mean by that is that you'll have experienced it before. You'll have experienced it in school. That I think I'm being very, very generalised and overgeneralising here, but I think you'll get what I mean. Is there's two different ways of speaking about mental health. And one of those ways is that people come in and they speak about mental health and they normally come from the NHS or some charity or something, and they're like, mental health is very serious and mental health is something that we all have to pay very close attention to. And we get very serious about it and we try and use a scare tactic to try and scare young people into looking at their own mental health and to speaking up and putting a hand up and saying, I'm struggling with that. And we try and frighten them. And sometimes I will say that I'm not saying that doesn't work. It can work in certain places. The other side of mental health training is the complete polar opposite, which is if just all we do, kids, is that when we put our school uniform on, if you make sure a smile is part of your school uniform before you leave the house, then everything will be fantastic. And if we can just be nice to everybody and just make friends, and then we can eradicate bullying forever and everybody will be nice and we'll make a third year class that just all have group hugs when they go out for lunch. And we all know that basically that's not even possible, never mind probable. And we look at that, but it is that very encouraging, motivational, positive approach. And that can be nice as well. What we like to do is we like to fall somewhere in the middle with actually what we like to think is a little bit more of an engaging response where we can talk about the fact that there are sore things that happen, but we can talk about them in a way that doesn't make them feel sore. And the way we do that is by explaining to people how their minds work. There's a lovely thing. Some of you may have met us at things like Scottish Learning Festivals and things like that before. If you've not, well, if you were at the Education Expo this year, then potentially you were the only one that was at the Education Expo because it was exceptionally quiet. And we stood there. So nobody met us at the Education Expo because nobody was there, basically, this year. But hopefully next year things will be back to normal and we'll see. But if you've ever met us, then you'll know because we walk around with these little things attached to our fingers and asking people to take our mental health tests. This is I'm spoiling my thing if you do meet us next year, but this is a thing called a finger trap. And basically the whole idea is that the harder I pull, the more it grabs me. And so I actually have to do the opposite to get myself out. I don't pull, I push. And when I push, my fingers will just fall out of it. And it's a dead lovely little mental health metaphor that we use in lots of our presentations and our assemblies in our classrooms because the kids really enjoy it. Young people really get it. It's practical, it's tangible, I understand it. But the real teaching point here is that if you understand how this little thing works, because people can get a little bit freaked out when their fingers get stuck. And oh my God, my fingers are stuck. And they panic and they do more of what they were doing before. They just pull and they pull and they pull and you're like, stop. Just do the opposite of what you think you should do. And this is just like we do with mental health. If we can understand how this works, when we understand it, then all of a sudden we're not as scared of it anymore. We're people who can approach it in a way that goes, I know why I'm anxious. Now, that doesn't change the fact that I'm feeling anxiety, but I can understand my anxiety. And because of that, I can now change it. So with that in mind, that's basically what we do. We go around and have these positive conversations, explaining to people exactly how their mind works. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I am going to share with you some slides. Now, I'm going to jump in and out of the slides because I hate being the wee box at the side. I think it's just really boring just to sit and watch the side. If I do that. Oh, look, I'm now on my slide. How exciting is that? There we go. Go on Teams. If I move myself over here. No, I'll leave myself there. Anyway, if that gets really annoying, then I'm going to change it. Let me make myself small. Look, I can make myself smaller. This is so cool. I love Teams sometimes. Anyway, right, so that's actually much better. Now I can leave it up because now you can see me and see the slide at the same time. So what I want to do is I want to tell you a bit of a story. And the story is about rainbows. Now, I might jump myself off because I'll see how I feel. Right, so let me explain mental health to you by explaining rainbows. Not explaining rainbows, but more telling you a story about them. Right, let me come out of that and I should be back. Right, okay. So let me explain rainbows. So imagine that you and I and some other people, we go for a walk. And can I just say before I tell this story, it's very important to say that I am going to use some very, very black and white distinctions between how people see the world when I do this. So I am going to use some relatively black and white. I know that there are a million shades of grey in what I'm about to talk about, but it's just to make the point of what I'm talking about. So imagine that you, I, and a group of other people, we go for a walk. When we go for a walk, obviously not just now because it's almost twilight here anyway. I'm out in Johnston, kind of Paisley area, so we're a bit dark now. But imagine it's during the day. We go for a walk and there's a beautiful rainbow in the sky. And we all look, our whole group look at the rainbow and we all look at each other and we go, oh my God, isn't that stunning? And somebody in our group turns around and says, oh, isn't it stunning? Isn't that rainbow amazing? And thank goodness for the glory of God, because God has given us such incredible sacred wonders with which we should worship God here on earth. That we can look at that rainbow and see God manifested in the beauty of the planet. Now, next to them, somebody else turns around and says, God? That's nothing to do with God, pal. That's entirely physics. If there are any physics teachers on, please do not correct my physics if I get this mildly wrong. That's physics. That's just the refraction of light through water droplets in the upper atmosphere. It means it's probably been raining. And what's happened is it's separated it out into the visible light spectrum. And we are now looking at that light spectrum and we can see it when normally it's hidden from us and just photons bouncing about. And they go, isn't that amazing? And we leave them having a theological argument at the end of our line. Next to them, we then notice, because we're caring people, our minds are then distracted by somebody standing there and they're crying their eyes out. And you're like, oh my God, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. It's just that I've had a really bad week. And my gran said that if I was ever having a bad day, she'd send me a rainbow from heaven. So it's obviously my gran who's sent me this rainbow to tell me that she's thinking of me. And we go, fine. And we give that person a great big hug. I do always, just for sheer comedy effect, anytime I tell this story, if any of you are on from Paisley, you will have heard this story recently. But I just always imagine God standing up there behind a big lectern with a big row of grannies just going like that, would you like a rainbow or a white feather? Rainbow or a white feather? And just slowly pushing the button as they all appear all over the place, wherever that might be. Now, here's the thing. The next person, now, I don't know how many guys have we got on. We've got a couple of guys on, right? I'm going to be very stereotypical here and say this is normally a guy one, is that we look up, we see the rainbow, and we go, because we're clever, we work out that if there's been a rainbow, that means it's been raining at some point, or it's definitely damp. And then we think, oh no, she pure told me to get the washing in before I left for work, and I totally promised, and I said I would, and oh no, I've totally forgotten. And then we look at the ground, and the ground's soaking, and there's puddles, and I'm in for it now. I promised. She said, do I need to leave a post-it in the front door? And you're like, no, I promise, I'll definitely remember before I leave. Now, what I do with this rainbow, this is the last one I promise. What I do with this rainbow is I take a photograph of it and I post it on my Instagram because I'm a mental health person. And I post it on my Instagram with the caption, in order to have the rainbow, you first must have the rain. Hashtag mental health awareness. And many people validate me, and internet strangers tell me how deep I am and how they've never known anybody to have that thought before. Now, here's the point, right? Let's now get away from our rainbow, but only a little bit. The point is that I think I gave 6 examples there. One rainbow, 6 examples of how different people can perceive that rainbow. Because for 6 different people, it had 6 different meanings. And I understand that there can be mixes of these, in the real world, these are all mixed up. But ultimately, this is what mental health is. And mental health is all about meaning. Everything about mental health is about meaning, not just about rainbows. I use the rainbow as an example, but for anything, if there is no meaning, there is no feeling. So if somebody feels something about something, it's because something meant something to them. If I tell you just now, I'm completely making this up just now, just in case anybody is interested in this, but if I was to tell you just now that the University of Sussex drew in a basketball match at the weekend with the University of Warwick, I'm going to imagine that most of you don't really care about that, and therefore you don't feel anything because it doesn't have any meaning. There's nothing there. There's no impact to it. But if I was to tell you something about, like, you know, that even your kid's soccer team or the football soccer team, I've been watching too much World Cup like that. I'm going on an American soccer team. Where am I from? See what that meant to me? That meant to me, who are you talking to, Brian? Anyway, your kid's football team, let's get this right. If it's your kid's football team, or if it was something to do with, you know, you or something you're connected to, or your school, you know, you might hear, I might be able to tell you just now that, oh, do you know what? I heard the other day that some things over here, or this school over here in this area, get given awards by their local authority. And I bet you probably not feel anything unless it's your local authority and you're like, why did they get that? Why did they get that award? Why did we not get an award? Why did we not even know these awards were going? And all of a sudden it means something. So because it means something, it has a feeling to you. Why is this important to mental health? Because, as I said before, this is how all mental health works. If there is no meaning, there is no feeling. So what we're dealing with now with the young people that you help, the young people that you work with, the young people that you are assisting in everything they do. I'm just going to jump back onto the slides. I don't know if I'm going to appear again. I'm not. I'm just going to leave the slide up for just now. I will appear in it if I, in fact, see if I click that one. Let's see what happens. That's even worse. Anyway, I'm just going to leave it like that for a wee bit. Here's the important point. Everything that we're dealing with the young people that we work with, is everything to do with meaning. The meaning of many things has changed, not just because of COVID, but because of social media, because of the way that we now ask our children to grow up a little bit faster, because quite often of social media. They now make many, many more decisions than we ever had to make decisions. If you think about the way that ultimately for me, maturing is about being able to make better and better decisions. And now by the time I'm 15, I have a Starbucks order, I have a Costa order. I have to make decisions about loads of things. When I was 15, if I went for an ice cream, I would probably end up with a Fab or a Zoom from a local like garage where I open a slidey door topped freezer and have a look in it and see what have they got. If I was really lucky and I was feeling rich, I might get a Mivvy. But apart from that, pretty much where I am is I'm just looking into this thing. Now, if I go out for ice cream, I have multiple choices about multiple toppings, and we're making our young people make more and more and more and more decisions. And what that's changing is they therefore feel more in control. And because they feel more in control, even though it's only about ice cream and coffee, then the world starts to change its meaning. The whole thing that's going on at the moment about cost of living and jobs and all of this fear-mongering that goes on, and some of it, by the way, I say fear-mongering, some of it's real, some of it's genuine. So, I mean, we can't say that it's not got a basis in reality. But if I'm 14, I remember I grew up, so when I was 14, it would have been 1987 when I was 14. So I was at the end of Thatcherism and all of these types of things. I remember what it was like to grow up with the thought that maybe there might not be any jobs. I remember then thinking that the whole world had to change to try and find a way to find that job. And that's kind of what many of us did. But we all had hope. There are many kids growing up, and the meaning of the world at the moment is that they don't have hope. And here's the slide that I've left this up for. Is this is the understanding that I love people to have, especially people like you guys who... Yes.
Brian, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry to interrupt you mid-flow. I can't see a slide.
All right, did I take it away? Hang on a second. Let me try again. And let me see if I can try again. And see if I just put it up. No, that's okay. Is that one showing? Yes. Right, excellent, fantastic. I'm just going to leave it up like that then, and I'm just going to stay in the cover. Thank you, Kat. Cheers for letting me know, because otherwise I bet you're not the only one. So thank you very much for letting me know. But this is the slide that I'd love everybody to know, especially people who help young people, is that mental health is an inside-out process, not an outside-in process. And this is how we challenge the status quo around mental health. Because what happens in mental health is we deal, and a lot of the resources that we're given are outside-in processes. We are, and you guys as teachers are given lots of outside in things. So you're given resources that are practical. You're given the ability to bring someone back on a limited timetable, for instance, and that can be very useful. That can be a great thing. I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with a phased timetable, a limited timetable, and just bringing somebody and just easing somebody back into school, especially if they've been refusing for a long time. But if inside hasn't been dealt with, what are you meant to do? You can be given all the lessons in the world about friendship, but if we don't impact the young people inside, and this is why I've known Fiona for a while, and a lot of the programmes I'm sure you get through West, when we've started to deal with actually the reasons behind things like self-harm, the reasons behind things like alcohol or drug use. It's not about that. If I've got a 15-year-old who's smoking tons of weed, basically, and showing up into school stoned all the time, which I'm pretty sure most of you more than likely have a pupil that you've just thought of their name inside your head, because this is now becoming a more and more regular thing. We can deal with all of the drug use, and you can have a campus cop all you want, and you can try and police that and shut it down. But until we get into the reasons for it, what's going on inside, then we're not really going to have a long-term impact on it. What we need to understand is that mental health is an inside-out, not an outside-in thing. So we need to be understanding what young people are thinking. Now, with that in mind, what I want to do is I want to just go back to my story earlier on. Now, the way that I look at it, and if any of you have ever studied a thing called CBT or cognitive behavioural therapy, you'll have heard a version of this model. If you've ever studied a thing called NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, you will also have heard a version of this model. If by any chance you've ever seen me speak before, I've more than likely spoken about the model I'm about to speak about, which is an adaptation of lots of different things. Just a simple way to think about how mind works. So if we think about the rainbow again, the rainbow is simply a trigger. So the rainbow just is. The rainbow just exists. Exams just exist. 14-year-olds just exist. School just exists. French and English and maths, they all just are. And you could have 30 kids and 30 young people, all of whom have a completely different meaning about that. None of those meanings you've ever impacted on by the time you stand in front of them as a class teacher. So if you're somebody like a maths teacher especially, as maths is a classic one for it, by the time you stand in front of a first-year class who are brand new into your school, they have had already 11 or 12 years of programming about meaning to sums and maths, including mum or dad constantly walking around going, oh, see, when I was at school, I was rubbish at maths too. Oh, I couldn't do it either. Oh, I hated maths when I was at school. All these little things that build up this meaning inside my head, so that when you say, welcome to maths, you're just a trigger. What you trigger inside my head is a meaning. That meaning happens as a thought inside my head that then tells me how to feel. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Let's keep on using the negative maths example. So therefore, what happens is you're standing in front of me, welcome to maths. Everybody has told me I'm bad at sums. I was okay at primary school, but I've been told it's much more difficult at high school. Then what happens is I get this feeling of mild anxiety, and now my behaviour is I'm going to find this really difficult, and I'm slightly shut off. And this is how it works. Trigger, thoughts, feelings, and then actions. And then those actions in themselves can then become triggers, and then it works like a great big loop. So let's go back to our 14-year-old. So what happens to our 14-year-old? Our 14-year-old, we know what the trigger was. We know that mum and dad splitting up was a significant event and a significant time in this young lady's life. We've got that. Mum has already spotted that, and it does seem as if mum was right. But it wasn't that. It was the meaning that she put on it. We're going to come back to that in a wee second. The actions that she's doing, we've already talked about them. She's school refusing, she's drinking, she's going and she's hanging around with the wrong crowd, as mum calls it. How's she feeling? She's feeling anxious. Her self-esteem is low, and she's feeling crap. But what mum missed was that young lady actually told her what was going on. Because what mum did was mum mummed all over it. And mum did exactly what parents do. By the way, not just mums, dads do this as well. And so do you guys as teachers, because you care so much. So when a young person turns round and says something like, I'm not good enough and nobody likes me, we go, counter-example. And we come in and go, no, that's not true, because, and we try and give lots and lots of different reasons. But the simple fact is for this young lady, it felt true. And to her, she'd made it true in here, and nobody was telling her why it wasn't. Nobody was getting into her head and taking it away. Mum missed it. She was so busy dealing with the triggers and trying to get her husband to behave. And by the way, the happy medium somewhere in those two parents is somewhere in the middle, which we eventually had a conversation with them about. The actions, again, it's like she goes out and she thinks that nobody likes her. So when she goes out and these people seem to want to have her about, and then they go, here, drink this. And they go, here, drink this thing. This will be part of our group. All of our group are doing it. She just wants to fit in. She wants to feel as if people like her. So she doesn't want to be the one that goes, no, I'm not drinking that. So she ends up drinking that. And then some boy comes around and says, oh my God, you're pretty. And she goes, oh my God, he likes me. So maybe I am good enough. Maybe I am okay. And that feeling for a wee temporary moment goes away. And she chases that. But then she sobers up and she wakes up. And then mum's really angry at her again. And dad's like, whatever. And then it all spins round. Mental health is an inside out thing. Nobody was helping this young lady with the fact that she didn't feel good enough. And nobody was helping her realise that people did like her and that actually mum and dad did love her, even though she was hearing the words that were actually too close. My point here is that we can deal with the logic of things. I'm just going to pop a slide back up again. Keeps on trying to get me to update a driver that I don't want to update just now. But the way we can look at it when we look at logic and emotion is we can look at that logical thoughts are all about external focus. They're based on tangible evidence. This is when we deal with behaviour. Many of you will be so well trained. Again, if you've done, MVP training and all of these types of things, they all deal with the fact that we have to get behind this logic. We can't just deal with behaviour. We have to deal with the reasons for that behaviour. This is why everybody's saying this. This is the finger trap. This is understanding how a brain works. This, by the way, can I just say, is also true of every single one of you listening to this just now. So if you've been dealing with something and dealing with just behaviour with your own children or your own partner or anything like that, then the same thing goes. But it's not the problem. I can manage a kid's behaviour. I remember working with a young man in a school once, and nobody had ever taken the time to get behind his logic. So his behaviour was terrible, right? It was really high tariff and his behaviour was terrible. He had ADHD, dyslexia going on as well, very late diagnosis on a couple of them. So again, some of the meaning had already been established for him. I'm stupid, I don't fit in, everybody's different from me, everybody's cleverer than me. The meaning of school became, I can't keep up. And unfortunately for him, nobody spotted why it wasn't his fault until that meaning was pretty much backed in. He used to lose his temper with teachers. And when he used to lose his temper with teachers, one of the things that he would do was he would get really annoyed because teachers would come down on him like a ton of bricks. Why would teachers come down on him like a ton of bricks? Well, they come down on him like a ton of bricks because of the meaning of him in the classroom was, oh God, he's in the class, this is going to be a nightmare. So they come down on him like a ton of bricks. But when I spoke to him, what he wanted was, I want people to know that I'm a nice guy. But see, when they tell me I'm not a nice guy, I lose my temper. And now we've got this loop. We've got this horrible loop where the teachers were trying to control behaviour, but he was then exploding because he didn't know that he was trying to get over that he was a nice guy. I didn't do anything. I didn't talk. I didn't throw that pencil. I didn't do that thing, when sometimes actually he had done that. And we have this horrible loop. We have to interrupt this loop. And how we do that is by getting into emotional thoughts. When we start to get into emotional thoughts, now everything changes. This is this internal focus, the beliefs, the perceptions, the meaning. And this is where we create sustainable impact. The last thing I'll say to you just before we go on to the e-Sgoil stuff is about how all this then fits together. You see, the fact is that all of this meaning creates patterns in us. It will show up in everything that we do. So because our world is filtered through meaning, because it's through this emotional thinking, this thinking that happens inside our minds, we're not actually ever really functioning on the real world. We're not actually impacting on the real world. We focus on an impact on our version of that real world. I know that you might not care about it, and that's okay if you don't, can I just say, but one of the easiest ways to explain this is through football teams. Depending on the school that I go into, depends on how much I talk about which football team I support. I've got to admit, sometimes when it's the school that maybe is more likely to support the other football team, I probably do ramp it up a little bit. Let's just say I went to Turnbow High School and my name is Brian Anthony Costello. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science to put some meaning on that. If you're from the west of Scotland, you'll probably be able to work it out. But the point is that this just shows you, and my best mate supports the other team, the wrong team. But so when he sees them, it means something totally different to what it does that it means to us. And this is true everywhere, but it's a pattern. And when I get something like that young lady who's going about saying that she's not good enough will show up again and again and again everywhere she goes. It will show up as not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. If I could teach teachers in terms of mental health, because I know you're not therapists, I have the joy, can I just say, of coming into schools and getting put in a wee room with a wee Headstrong logo on it, as my team do, and we are locked in that room for one period with one kid, undisturbed, with time to talk to them. I get that when you try that, the phone is ringing, emails are coming in, some other kid appears at the door going, excuse me, miss, excuse me, sir, can I speak to you for a minute? You're like, right, okay, 10 minutes. You're being called somewhere else, and you probably have a meeting in 10 minutes that you've not prepared for because you've not had time, because some third year had a meltdown this morning in period 1 when you planned on doing it. I get that you can't do this all the time. You're not therapists, and I'm not asking you to be. But if we can teach the teachers in our schools, and it starts quite often with you guys, because the fact that you're even here on a twilight session at 20 to 5 on a Monday says a little bit about who you are, that there's a meaning in the fact that you're here and that many of your colleagues are not. There is a meaning in that for me. But if we can start to teach people about that these are patterns that show up again and again and again, then we can start dealing with the patterns rather than dealing with the behavior. And when we do that, dealing with the patterns and why they run, we can make significantly huge changes. Now, with that in mind, and I hope you just have a think about that. I want you to think about how that manifests itself in your school. Do you agree with that? Have you experience of that? What questions do you have for that? Because in about 15, 20 minutes, I'll stop and I'll take some questions. But what I do want to do is I want to tell you just now that we have help. There is help at hand because we have some resources for you. Now, let me just move that across there. So we partnered up with e-Sgoil last year to create some resources around mental health that are currently on the e-Sgoil website for free. I'll show you where they are, and then what I'll do is there's a QR code going to pop up on your screen, not in the next slide, but the slide after that, and it'll stay on for a wee bit. Scan the QR code, it will take you straight to them. I'm going to take you through them in a wee bit of detail. But if you go to the e-Sgoil website, and it's /mental health, so it's e-Sgoil.com / mental health. And if you come down, you'll see that we've got a whole heap of things. If you happen to be somebody involved in transition, so if you've got anything around S1 or your P7, then there's a whole heap of P7, S1 transition stuff that's on there. It's only 2 sessions, but it's all on there. It works exactly the same way as this stuff that I'm about to show you. Look how good my video is. Look how well timed it is. So there's stuff on there for teachers and parents, and I'll show you how that all works through this. But this is the one that you are more than likely more interested in, which is the mental health learning sessions for S1 to 3 and then S4 to 6. Now, if you click on that document, it's an interactive PDF. It's actually really, really clever, and it's really nicely done. There are 6 lessons for S1 to 3. And these are what we call lessons in a box. The S4 to 6, we've got lives that we did. So these were done in February of this year. So they're more like discussion points for classes. But if we look at the lesson in a box, you've both got a lesson plan and a video. I and my colleague Mark do the teaching for you. The lesson plan is lessons objectives as starters, which will let you, like this one, who knows what a phobia is. It tells you how long the video is, and just to push play. And it even has an activity. Now, this one that we're in just now, the activity's relatively vague. How could we help people understand that their mental health is not fixed or stuck? Now, I've already done that teaching for you in the video. The 12-minute video is me talking to you and talking to your class, actually, about that. You can literally pick these up and go bang into the middle of the class and just start going, and you will be absolutely fine, I promise. It really is a lesson in a box. All your E's and O's are all down there for you as well, so you know what boxes you're ticking and you know what you're doing, which for me is a huge benefit of these things, is that you can say, look at what I've covered in just one 45-minute lesson. Now, that was the lesson plan. It's all there. And then if you click on the video, it will take you to Vimeo, and you will get Brian on here talking to you. If you'll just see me push play here, and I should pop up on the screen. I think actually I paused this with a ridiculous kind of view. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. What a perfect place to finish it, Brian. And a perfect place to just pause yourself is that look right there. That's exactly what you want to do. Anyway, so everything is there for you. These videos, even with this ridiculous face that I am pulling, and now you have to go and watch the video to find out why I'm pulling that ridiculous face, are absolutely 100% lessons in a box. You don't need anything apart from some scrap paper and a pen per pupil. We have made them so that you can literally pick them up and run them. And as I said, all your E's and O's are there. But let me take you through what's actually there, and I can get myself off the screen with that ridiculous look in my face. Right. So, as I said there, there's if you scan that QR code, it will take you right to it. But we'll also share these slides with you. So the QR code will also be in them. Everything is needed. Starter an activity, and you don't need anything apart from the screen, the speakers, and some scrap paper. I will say that 2 schools, even though these are S1 to 3, 2 schools did run them with senior pupils with decent feedback. Some of the feedback was that some of the examples we use are a little bit kiddie, they're a little bit junior, because they were designed for S1 to 3, so they're always going to be. But if you framed that up at the beginning, you'd absolutely take an S4, 5 or 6 class through this. If you had an emergency place take or a class cover, all of a sudden you're running and going, I don't know what I'm going to do. Just pick up one of these and off you go. So these sessions in a little bit more detail and what we cover in them. So as I said, there's 6 of them. How mental is mental health? This is one that's delivered by me. And the main focus is what we've talked about tonight, which is one of the reasons I wanted to cover that. So inside out, not outside in. That's what I talk about. And the idea, and I give lots and lots of examples of how our mental health comes from inside our head. But I use much more relevant examples to the young people. So I use things like anxiety, self-harm. So albeit, and I think it's such a good example of what we do, because we talk about things like self-harm, anxiety, depression, feeling down, feeling flat, stress, trauma, friendship problems. But I hope that if you watch the video, you'll see that we cover these in a way that is so, we don't hold back, but we're gentle enough that nobody's going to go running from your class, burst into tears. At least that's the plan anyway. We then have number 2, which is what is normal, which is delivered by my colleague Mark. The main focus is patterns and how they affect us. Remember we said about those patterns? So, the normal is we call it. So we call it your normal. How does your normal run? And the activity in that is to prepare a diary of a normal week. So it's to notice the regular things that happen, both positive and negative. I go to my football on a Monday, I go to my gymnastics on a Wednesday. My dad's always out on a Tuesday because he has this. My mum's late home from work on a Thursday. Whatever it might be, you know, and we get them to map it out with the discussion around what are the normals that you would like to change? Where would that pattern be helpful if it shifted a little bit? And also, what are the normals that you enjoy? So it's a really powerful session about spotting, again, that we're inside out, not outside in. You do not have to watch these in any order. It's not that you have to have done number 1 to do number 2. So if something's up in your school or you have a specific E&O that you're looking to meet, then by all means go through them all, and you can deliver these in any order at all. Becoming Ourselves, which is delivered by me, and this is all about the creation of our personality. And we use Inside Out as an example here, which is why I think S4, 5 and 6 find it a little bit kiddie. Again, you know, but we talk about these things of islands of personality. And if you've never seen Inside Out, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. It's the Pixar movie. We don't use any clips, so there's no copyright things. We just use it as an example and a way of talking about islands of personality. So Inside Out, genuinely, from a mental health perspective, if you're ever doing a mental health lesson, is a mine of resources. It is absolutely a mine. You could do session 3 here, this Becoming Ourselves session, and then watch Inside Out with your class and you know, just take them through it over 3, 4, 5 lessons. That has been a plan, but unfortunately the copyright issue is a bit of an impingement to that. But if you watch it in your class, there's so much to learn about that age, 13 years old, all the changes that get made. And that as well comes into this about teaching people who we are, which is Mark's session. This is all about how the impact that we have on others, how we teach people how to treat us, that we impact people, that we have this. And by the way, this is a good one for teachers to notice as well, because you teach people how to treat you too. There are two possible activities that I like to flag up when I talk to people about this. Mark's set up, and what he sets up in the video is 5 things with a partner. Now, it's 5 things that you think that people see you as. So 5 things you think how you're perceived, and then you share that with a partner, and then the partner says, well, I think that you're perceived this way. We did this a wee while ago, and I've got to admit, I think we've just not had a chance to re-record the video. I think unless you've got a class that you can trust, that's a little bit of a punchy activity. But in the lesson plan is that 5 things done yourself. So 5 ways that I perceive myself and 5 ways that I think other people perceive me, and then sharing that as a class, as a discussion topic. I think that one's a little bit safer, but I just want to flag that up so that if you use it, you know that you've got 2 lessons, and you might need to say, look, we're not going to do that one, we're going to do this one instead. Session 5, although again not in any particular order, is called Mission Possible, and it's all about having a big why. It's all about the idea of purpose, about being able to think long term. One of the things that young people don't learn is they don't learn how to think long term. When you're 10 years old, for instance, you don't think past your birthday. That's pretty much it. You're just here. It's like you don't think past the nose on your face. And then you get to second year and everybody goes, now it's about big grown up decisions. And they ask you to start thinking long term without anybody ever teaching you. In this session, we do start talking about that, and we do an activity which is really aspirational, which is all about the big dream. It's not about right or wrong or what's possible. It's just about getting people to think. And then what we do is we map it back. So in order to do that, what do you want to be? Or what do you need to do? Sorry. So if I want to be Cristiano Ronaldo and I'm 15 years old, what do I need to do that? And that includes getting out onto a pitch and practicing every day, eating certain things, drinking certain things, taking care of my body. And we want to try and uncover that long-term thinking has impacts to now, but it's all made possible because you have a why, and difficult things are easier when you have a why to do them. And the last in our 6 lessons in a box is Hello to Motivation, delivered by Mark. And this is about pleasure versus pain. We talked earlier on about that some people teach mental health through a pleasure versus pain model. You know, so I'll frighten you into dealing with your mental health. I'll frighten you into behaving, which in some cases is actually an okay motivation. But Mark will talk about pleasure and pain. And the exercise in this one is all about role models. And as we look up to people who we see as role models, whether that be a famous person or someone in our family, how they motivate themselves and what they use to become them. It's a really powerful lesson about realizing that motivation is also an inside out thing, something you have to find. It's not something that you can be given. The S4 to 6 resources, just very quickly, because these are more lives. As I said earlier, short talks, about 15-20 minutes. And they're more a form of a basis for you. They don't have any lesson plans, any activities with these, but they will be able to, for you to be able to go through definitely some discussion points. They were delivered because we knew that prelims were happening in January, February. So you'll see a little bit of exams, and actually exam chat. There's also some things that happen in them where there's questions that are sent in because they were actually live. So we've got questions coming in from various people around the country because they went out to the whole of Scotland. Number 1, what is mental health? So I do the rainbow story. I talk about meaning and how meaning affects our results. So what does study mean? What does the future mean? What does going to university mean to you? Are you somebody who goes that university is something I must do, which might be putting really pressure on you? Or are you someone who university means people like me don't go to university? And it's very much around asking for help, both mental health and for the study. These are all delivered by me, by the way, as well, which is why it doesn't say delivered by Brian or Mark. Emotional resilience, that you don't get feelings for free. So the fact that every emotion you feel takes a little bit of energy. So all of your emotions take energy, and that's a really important thing to understand. The mind is a muscle, so we're looking at it about being mentally fitter. It's a really interesting metaphor for discussion. How do you make yourself mentally fit? I mean, honestly, a really, really good debate with S4, 5 and 6 is how do you make yourself mentally fitter? Not more resilient, not tougher, not resistance, but actually fitter so you can put up with the hard times, because there's always going to be hard times. Overcoming hurdles, so inside out, not outside in, facing fear and being able to do it anyway, and how we change the inside to change the outside. There's, again, talking about the fact that there's always going to be hurdles. There are going to be barriers to your success and what you want in life. And finally, our mental health boosters. So sleep, social media detox, find your tribe. I think there's 4 of them. That's just 3 of them, where I take them through 5 mental health boosters that can really impact on young people's experiences. As I say, these 4 here don't come with lesson plans and activities, but they're there for you. I don't want to labour the point on these because you guys are experienced enough to be able to find them. And as I say, I will share the slides with Kat and Fiona after this, and they can be popped out to you. So that if you need a quick, oh, what was that one again? Which one do I want? Then you'll have that at your fingertips, albeit that is also there on the e-Sgoil website, should you want it. I've got one more slide, but I'm going to leave that because it's a wee bit just about what Headstrong do. But I just want to see, just do a wee summary and chat to you. Basically, what we want to do and our purpose at Headstrong is, as I said earlier with the finger trap, is just about education. You guys, when you were doing your teacher training, and much as I say, Fiona and Kat and the team at West, and I'm sure in your local authority areas, do so much education. It is on top of what you already do. And sometimes it's really useful to have mental health partners that you can say, they're the expert in that. That's what they do every day, full time. And I'm going to go to them because they can do that. And it takes the weight off you. It means that you've got less to have to think about because we can do that. These resources are there. They are sitting on the internet right now. They are entirely free. I personally think you'd be mental not to use them because they're just sitting there. And I think that if genuinely, I do think that by you watching them, that there's an education in there for you. And I hope that if you can roll it out through your school, send the email out, send the slides out and say, by the way, these resources for here for anybody doing PSHE or anything like that, just as they're education for you too. I don't think you're allowed to mark them down as CPD, but you can at least, you can be listening in and they are education for you as well. But we've covered quite a bit in that wee hour. As I say, I will do a wee slide just to explain to you who we are and what we can do specifically in your school with these resources. But if there's any questions, Fiona and Kat are there. You can put a hand up if you know how Teams work, or just unmute your microphone and we'll be able to see it at our side. And Kat and Fiona might have some questions or comments as well. I don't know.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say thank you very much, Brian, at the moment, and I am going to stop the recording.